My name is Lieutenant Colonel Mike Vaccaro, Air Force, retired, and I'm at Oshkosh standing in front of a MiG-29 with Bill Gaius, who's the director down here and runs the Warbirds flight line, and he asked me to come out and talk about some experiences I've had flying with MiG-29s, not in MiG-29s, but in the Air Force I was very fortunate, and I flew F-15Cs, and I spent the last part of my career down on the Gulf Coast of Florida in operational test and evaluation, and we had a really unique opportunity in the late 90s to fly with some former East German MiG-29s. The German Air Force kept one squadron of MiG-29s after reunification for a period of time that we used for dissimilar combat training, both in the United States and over in Europe. And Bill just asked me to talk a little bit about what it's like to fly against a MiG-29. So I've had a couple of opportunities to do what is probably the most fun thing we get to do in the fighter community, and that's what we call basic fighter maneuvers, or 1v1 maneuvering.
Your childhood cancers worldwide.
And had a couple opportunities to go out in the Gulf range with the MiG-29 and dogfight. I was flying an F-15C at the time, even with the Dash 220 engines, and the MiG-29 is a fantastic little energy machine for a fourth generation fighter.
Powering up, and you see all that black
smoke. Which means it can turn really, really well. So it's an awful lot of fun to dogfight against.
Worldwide.
When I was a lieutenant back in the 80s, this was the primary adversary, and it's really unique to get to watch them at the air show. If you have an opportunity, when you get to watch a fourth generation airplane like this fly, and then at the same demonstration you get to see a fifth generation airplane fly like a F-22 or an F-35. Becomes immediately apparent, even just standing on the ground, how much more energy the fifth generation fighters are able to generate. So airplanes like the F-15 and the F-16 and the MiG-29 and its partner in crime, the Su-27, are all good airplanes, but they're pretty significantly outclassed by anything that's in the fifth generation right now. However, it still presents a great opportunity for training against an adversary aircraft that you may run into in a little bit lower tech war. And certainly what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, I believe the MiG-29s are the primary fighters that the Ukrainians are flying. The airplanes are still around.
The Alpha Jet's tucked in nice and tight.
So it's just a neat airplane, and it's absolutely cool that folks like these can pull this together and bring a jet like this up to Oshkosh so us folks can actually still experience it out in the wild.
Let's just watch and listen to the
For our next inductee, he was quoted as saying once, "There's nothing else like it." That's JB's response when he was asked to explain the experience of piloting an F-15 Eagle fighter jet in peacetime or in combat. "There's every emotion," he explained, "every element of excitement and intrigue. In combat, though, multiply that times 10. As you're about to see, John J.B. Kelk's lifetime in the air can easily be explained the same way. From record victories to record hours to 2 dual full-time careers spanning more than 30 years each. There's just simply nothing else like it."
America's future will be determined by your dreams and your visions.
For some of you will travel where no man has ever traveled before. Some of you will fly the fastest planes that have ever been built. Reach the highest altitude that man has ever gone to.
Whether you serve in the skies above or on the ground below, each of you has stepped forward to defend your country.
The American people support you. They are counting on you, and they believe you truly do represent the best of America.
Ready? Ready to go.
The F-15 can fly 3 times as fast as a 747 passenger jet. Its massive engines generate over 50,000 pounds of thrust.
The Soviet MiG-29 was a very agile, very capable fighter aircraft designed by Mikoyan specifically to counter new U.S. fighter planes like the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle and the General Dynamics F-16 Falcon. Deployed into the Soviet Air Force in 1983, it was also sold to India, Libya, East Germany, and other Soviet allies, including Iraq. By 1990 and the invasion of Kuwait, the Iraqi Air Force had 39 MiG-29s. Captain John J.B. Kelk was an F-15 pilot in the 33 Tactical Fighter Wing based at Elgin Air Force Base in Florida. On August 28, 1990, his fighter wing was deployed to Saudi Arabia and began training for the war that might or might not come. On January 15, 1991, Iraqi forces still occupied Kuwait. On the 16th, Kelk's fighter wing learned that the airstrikes would begin on the following day. JB's interest in aviation started early. At age 3 or 4, he was already pestering his parents to take him to the airport at Eau Claire, Wisconsin, to watch the airplanes take off and land.
Fast forward then to high school, I started, I got my first part-time job as a janitor in a auto body shop, working for Mr. Tom Kiwan. Great role model and working hard. But he was also flying. And I said, oh, I've always had an interest in that. And so between the income that I would earn from there, then I had enough where I could actually begin flying lessons. And so I did. And so I approached Mr. Darrell Gibson, who's, by the way, a Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Famer himself. I approached him and I said, hey, I would like to work for you. And And so he hired me to work the flight line. Okay. At the time, we were also interested in flying. And so for me, that gave me a break on the flying lessons and the cost of the airplane.
JB learned to fly adding ratings until becoming a certified flight instructor during college.
That was in the late 70s, early 80s, and general aviation was really slowing down during that time. And I was about to graduate in a couple of months. And right there on the front page of the Wall Street Journal was an article that said the Air Force is short 2,000 pilots. And so I literally clipped that article out of the student news from the student library, took it to the recruiter, my local Air Force recruiter, laid it on his desk, and I said, "Is that true?" 3 months later, I had short hair and I was learning how to salute.
He graduated at the top of his class of 50, and he was the only one chosen to fly the F-15 fighter jet.
We had a Air Force Day where they flew in different types of airplanes, including an F-15 and F-16. And I took a look at that F-15 on the flight ramp, and I thought that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I ended up putting in for an F-15 on my dream sheet, and was lucky enough that I did get it.
In Iraq in 1991, the airstrikes began in the early hours of January 17th. It was a surprise attack targeting the capital and Scud missile sites. The F-15s would follow the first wave of F-17 stealth bombers to destroy any enemy planes and clear a path for the second wave of bombers. Kelk, in a flight of 4 F-15Cs, crossed the border into Iraq just after 3 a.m.
Number one is we trained at night where most of our adversaries do not. So we felt we owned the night. So as we swept in high, 30,000 feet, and my particular engagement, we found each other on radar roughly the same time. And so I could tell someone was locked to me and I was locked to this guy, and then employed my weapons, taking advantage of the greater speed and altitude up high that I had. So approximately a 20-mile missile shot, if you will, and then maneuvered away. We dropped chaff, which is designed to defeat the enemy radar, and I did that. Turned back in and then saw the fireball.
He learned that the enemy aircraft he had destroyed was a MiG-29, and the first MiG-29 ever shot down in combat.
And at that time, we were flying a lot. So I went back to the hooch and maybe tossed and turned for a few hours and came back in for my next flight. I remember the squadron commander, I says, I'm going to change this. I replayed this engagement in my head over and over and over again. And I know the timing. I'm going to confirm it. And he looked at me, he says, "You can't do that." "What do you mean I can't do that? I know what I saw." He says, "No, AWACS already confirmed it for you." So
Kelk retired in 2019 as a Major General with a total of 38 years of military service. Back in 2006, John Kelk became the first pilot to log more than 4,000 hours flying F-15s. Few F-15 pilots ever reached 2,000 hours in the Eagle. In an interview, Kelk said that the 4,000-hour milestone was nice to reflect on, but he said, "You cross it and then look at your next flight, because you're only as good as your last sortie." Kelk also had a 32-year airline career at American Airlines. American, in particular, had a friendly military absence policy, granting him ample time off and flexibility to continue his F-15 flying career, along with various staff positions, all while flying an airline schedule. Quote, "It wasn't always easy. Some months I would work a combined 25-plus days. But American Airlines and my supportive wife, Michelle, allowed me that dual career opportunity.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome retired American Airlines Captain, Air Force Major General John J.B. Kelk.
Thank you, Kurt. Can everyone hear me okay, I hope? Thank you, Kurt, for those overly kind and generous remarks, and Scott for the video. I really appreciate all those. Always strange seeing yourself in one of those. To anyone who's been filmed before, I think you can relate. What I would like to do is kind of channel my comments. You know, if you look at the banner, it says Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Fame. I want to focus on the first two letters, Wisconsin Aviation. The HF piece hasn't quite sunk in yet, so let me tie my remarks to that. And let me first begin by saying how unbelievably proud I am to be from Wisconsin, born and raised and educated in this state. Cheeseheads unite. I can think of no other place that the people have the values, the hard work ethic, and the true, genuine spirit of one-on-one engagement. A yes means yes and no means no. We can still smile while we do it. And it's always a pleasure to be up in this state. So I cannot thank my heritage growing up. And I do believe that is a foundation that those of us from this state can take and go around and export to, and that leads to success. And you'll hear me talk about that. So that's Wisconsin, number one. Number two is aviation. And for me, that began in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Chippewa Valley Regional Airport with Gibson Aviation. And you heard earlier, Gerald Gibson was my first aviation boss. And I'm so proud that Darrell Jr. is here to represent the Gibson family. Please extend my thanks to the entire Gibson Aviation family, and it was a family affair. And there's several alumni of that era in the 70s and 80s, and I can see them. There's John, myself, John, and Ron, all were flyers or worked at the airport during that time. And so it was a very, very special time. But it, for me, formed the aviation roots and foundation, which led to the career that you just saw. Speaking of which, when I began flying, and that was in 1975, hard to believe, 49 years ago, and my flight instructor is here. Jerry, would you raise your hand, Mr. Jerry LeBaron? Class of 2018, I might mention. And Jerry was, and like most good instructors, Jerry left quite an impression for me. And one of which I would highlight is not just passion. I think most of people in this room have a passion for aviation. But what he did is modeled for me what a guided passion is, or a professional passion. Passion means you're working towards something, okay? And I saw what he was working towards, and it kind of gave me this goal mindset. So it's not just enough to take a flying lesson, but how am I going to apply that? And so, Jerry, I thank you for that. The other thing that Jerry did for me to form a foundation for my aviation career was respect. And in this business, you have to respect what we're doing. And it doesn't matter if you're flying professionally or recreationally. You know, it's a three-dimensional sport. And you have to make sure you respect what you're doing. That means you put the time and effort in to do it right. So, Jerry, I credit you as starting my aviation foundation, leading to what you saw. And I thank you so much for that. You pretty well saw most of my Air Force career, so I don't really need to go over that. But here representing my Air Force family is Corey Cornum. Corey was my flight surgeon, and like a good flight surgeon or AME does, they keep you flying. They don't prevent you from flying. And so Corey, flight surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, but you know what Corey is to me? Corey's a flyer. All right, that's how I know him. He's a flyer. I had the chance to go out and fly in his carbon Cub tailwheel airplane out in Colorado recently, and just had a blast. It reminded me of the time John Wolfe and I would fly his Cessna 140 around in this state before I even entered the Air Force, and or brought a Super Cub back from the factory in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. Darrell Gibson Sr. allowed me to do that, and those memories are just so special. So again, Wisconsin and aviation, to that Air Force career, Corey, I'm honored that you're here. Let me shift to my American Airlines career for a moment. You saw the tail end of it, the water cannon salute, which was very special. But I do want to emphasize not just the military-friendly policy that American Airlines has. In my view, American, not to talk ill of anyone else, but in my view, American Airlines is a leader both in aviation safety as well as training. And so I asked Captain Tom Egbert and his wife to show up tonight to please, Amy, I want to convey my gratitude for the 32 years I had, and please take that both above and below, especially the flight admin office, the support that they gave me to be part of a culture that was that way. The aviation safety so aligns with how I believe things. Also, I'm joined by fellow Czech pilots. I see Eric Roth, Jim Flynn, and Steve Katarinas are here. I was very fortunate my last 5 years at American to work in the training department, and I mentioned the focus that American Airlines has on training. Not only that, but we were able, if you haven't seen, there's a huge turnover currently in airline aviation. 15,000 pilots roughly at American Airlines, and we're turning over half of them in less than 7 years. And so that's a huge responsibility, but also a huge joy. And I was able to work with these fine gentlemen. They're here today, particularly Steve Katarinas, who is our leader, and oh, by the way, a fellow Wisconsinite. So Steve, thank you for your leadership and mentorship. You're a great friend as well, so thank you so much. Shifting gears for foundations, of course, there's family. I'm joined by my older brother and best friend, as well as my biggest aviation cheerleader, Larry. Thank you so much for being here tonight, as well as Michelle, my wife. You saw the acknowledgement there. If I may, Michelle and I share a similar faith. That is, if God's given you certain opportunities and abilities, then you really need to act on it. That's why you're here. And so hers was education, special ed specifically, and mine was aviation. And so we were aligned that way, but the simple fact is I would not have had the career I did without your support. So I share this recognition with you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Lastly, let me bring this home with Wisconsin and aviation. I was a 21-year-old kid leaving this state to join the Air Force. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into, and I mean no idea. Well, at Gibson Aviation, we had a charter pilot by the name of Dan Dowdy, and he was a retired colonel, 24 years in the Air Force. So I approached Dan one day and I said, hey, I'm about to join the Air Force. Can you give me what can I expect? Give me some pointers. Give me the gouge. That's what all pilots want, right? And he looked at me. He was a pretty soft-spoken, quiet guy, but he looked at me and he said, don't let the little stuff bug you. And he kind of looked and little wry smile and then walked away. And I was like, that's it? Don't let the little stuff bug you? And I thought about that, but as I reflected on this more and more, he wasn't giving me advice to survive basic training or pilot training. Those are quite scripted, and they just play out the way they do. What he was giving me was career advice, all right? There's big stuff and little stuff. Big stuff is flying for the Air Force or supporting missions in the Air Force that defend a nation or promote peace throughout the world. Big stuff is flying safely to and from a destination with 180 people on board, or training the next generation pilots. That's big stuff. All the little stuff that gets in the way, it's just little stuff. And I had many times throughout my career, in both careers actually, where I would have maybe a crummy day or a bad day or something that was irritating me, but I would reflect on that. And what brought that home was that my worst day ever at American Airlines or the Air Force was still better than the best day Colonel Dan Dowdy had as a 7.5-year POW in Vietnam. Think about that. So that was the best advice anyone ever gave me, is to keep the big stuff in mind and the perspective. And I bring this all the way home to the foundation, is how grateful I am to be from this state, to give me the values and perspectives coming from Wisconsin and my roots in aviation that I had from Gibson Aviation. It is indeed an honor for me, 44 years after I left the state, to come back in this setting, to be honored in this way. I'm so grateful. Thank you all.
Secretary Kelk.